if I could give you guys 4 simple questions that could help you address 99% of all of the legal problems that you will have in business looking forward, what would you say? Obviously, that's a pretty loaded question. However, in this podcast today, I've called on the expertise of trade business lawyer Eliot Wagenheim to come on the show and talk about how we can specifically address these 4 questions in order to help you guys pave the way for a law-free business. So we go through a lot of really cool stuff in this podcast, and it was super interesting. We talk about everything from how to employ staff, how to create contracts that eliminate those awkward discussions. We talk about how to let people go the right way. We talk about how to employ people the right way. We talk about how to get paid and how to set payment terms, all this cool stuff. It's a really, really interesting podcast with a guy that's been doing this for tradies and contractors for 30 years. So I know you're going to love it. And if you do love it, and I know you will, I want you to head across to iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen to this podcast, and please leave us a review. The reviews help us with our ratings, and it is very important to us. We don't ask for a lot, but that is one thing we do ask for. So please head across to iTunes and leave us a review. If you're not sure how to get there, just go to the show notes and there'll be links where you can click straight on it and it'll take you right there. Anyway, that's all from me. Enjoy this show and we look forward to hearing your feedback. And Eliot has also offered, if you guys had anything specific that you would like covered off within the legal realm, then get in touch with us through either the website or you can send an email to inquiries@thesiteshed.com and let us know what it is you want to hear about and why you want to hear about it. Eliot's offered to come back on the show and address these legal issues specifically, and I think that's going to be very powerful for you guys. So yes, this is a very good general overview podcast, and we do cover off on a lot of things. However, obviously, within the space of an hour, you can only go through so much. So if you guys want more information, the offer is on the table. That's all from me. Enjoy. The SiteShed podcast is made possible because of Tradie Web Guys, creators of beautiful websites designed specifically for tradies and contractors. If you're tired of dealing with web designers that have no idea about your industry, then head across to tradiewebguys.com.au and reach out. Like many companies from all over the place, you'll be very glad you did.
Giving tradies and contractors around the globe the tools to run a modern business. You're listening to Toolbox Talks from the SiteShed. Now here's your host, Matt Jones.
Hello listeners and welcome back to Toolbox Talks on the SiteShed podcast. And today we are getting legal with Eliot Wagenheim from Washington, D.C. in the United States. G'day, Eliot.
G'day. Is that how you say it in Australia?
That's it. That's pretty good. Not bad.
Okay. Excellent. Here it's good evening. That's what time it is now.
It doesn't matter in Australia. It's g'day any time of the day, which makes life very easy.
There you go. I learned something. And we're not even 3 seconds in. That's great.
And to make it even easier, we don't even worry about names. We just go, g'day, mate.
Ah, much more efficient.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, we're ahead of the time on the clock and we're ahead of the curve when it comes to streamlining the simplicity of life. So, yeah, it's all about Australia.
Yeah, I think you've got it won. I think that's it.
I suppose the only thing we do have to take into consideration, as you alluded to earlier offline, was our 5-foot spiders.
Yeah, that's what's scared. That's probably the only reason I'm still in the United States is because my desperate fear of these 5-foot spiders that I keep seeing on Facebook that you seem to make pets out of over in Australia.
That's all right. We have an equal fear of Donald Trump, so we've got that in common.
Oh, don't even get me started. Don't get me started on that.
Oh, well, mate, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
And so we've never really done a podcast on the legalities of business. And I know this is quite a broad topic. And I imagine that we're probably going to have to elaborate on some of these topics within a couple of future podcasts, if that works for you. However, today I'd like to really dive into, I suppose, a bit of a general look into legalities. I know as business owners, at some point, we are inevitably going to come across situations which will encounter some sort of legal crossroad, good or bad. So I think it would be good just to maybe do a bit of a general cover on some of the things that we can do to prevent, negative legal things happening, then maybe things that we can do during a legal scenario, and then maybe some things we can do to address problems once we're in the middle of them.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So let's start with a little bit about you, I suppose. Can you give us a bit of a rundown to yourself and Wagenheim Law?
Sure. I mean, really what I think is important here is all I do is work with entrepreneurs and small to mid-sized businesses. Mm-hmm. I don't work with the, Northrop Grummans and Under Armours and General Motors of the world. I work with companies from 2 guys in a garage starting out to 300-400 employees. But that's all I've done. And believe it or not, I've done it for 30 years, which is a little bit depressing to me, but it's 30 years. And I've seen terrific successes, just really amazing companies. And I've been witness to some horrific crashes and burns, but that's what business is. It's all of those things, and sometimes in the same day.
Yeah, I suppose as well, we should clarify that you are located in Washington in the United States. So a lot of the stuff we talk about today, for the listeners out there, they should take on as general information. Of course, there's going to be some difference in legal jargon and whatnot.
Yeah, there are different local laws and regulations, but I think those are the easy things.
Right.
If you're diligent and you can, of course, today you can just go online and figure it out. The licenses that you need for your particular industry and your particular county, jurisdiction, whatever it happens to be, that's the stuff you can figure out pretty easily. And believe it or not, if you're reasonably diligent about what you're doing, that's not really what gets you tripped up.
Yeah.
It's the bigger issues, the things that require more thought, just like you said. What do I need at the outset? How do I avoid problems? And if problems occur, what do I do? Those are the bigger picture things you can't necessarily just look up one line.
Yeah, okay. And so is that where you see a lot of these companies running into problems? It's the more common sense side of things?
Well, it's the, let's put it this way, and I'm talking to entrepreneurs here, but really anybody that owns their own business. Mm-hmm. If you own your own business, if you've gone out and you've started your own business, or if you bought a business or whatever, there's a certain amount of optimism that runs through your veins.
Yeah.
There just is. And that's great, because that's what makes the economies run. That's what makes the world go round. That's what I think is incredibly exciting. But there's a downside to that. The downside is that if you're too optimistic, you tend to believe, well, what could possibly go wrong? This is all going to go right. My partner is going to be my partner for life. My customer is going to be my customer for life. My employees are never going to leave me. My vendors will lie down in traffic for me. I mean, you tend to get that mindset. And so you don't make sure that you account for, well, what happens if things don't work out as planned?
The what ifs.
Yeah, the what ifs.
Okay. Well, let's talk about a bit of them. So, I suppose primarily when we're looking at starting a business, or maybe we acquire a business, or whatever it may be, or maybe we're even entering into a business as an employee, there's going to be certain things that I suppose we should take responsibility for when we enter into those scenarios.
Yep.
Be that contracts, be that setting up the right business names, trading names, making sure that your qualifications are valid in that state, area, country, location, whatever it is, all these kind of things, right? Now, I imagine that's where a lot of people come unstuck, especially when they're dealing interstate or internationally. There must be a lot of things that you need to consider in that regard.
Well, there are. As far as the licensure goes, as far as the qualifications, then for that, it's worth a phone call to a business lawyer that practices in that area. Or, you can spend some time online and figuring out what you need to do. Mm-hmm. But that's a pretty quick thing. Generally speaking, you'll figure that out.
Yeah.
Now, if you're in the United States and you want to import heavy equipment from certain states in the Middle East that are on lists that you'd rather not be a part of, okay, that might be a more involved issue, because there are a lot more laws to do with that. But it's not the laws so much. I'll tell you where most businesses that I see have problems. It's not in violating the licensure rules or the laws or whatever. It's in creating their agreements with their clients and their partners, and if they're an employee, as you mentioned, with their employer.
Okay.
And here's where they come into problems. And I've come to realize that there are 4 questions, and only 4 questions, that you have to ask in every situation before you start into a relationship. Okay? And by the way, here's an added bonus. It doesn't matter whether that relationship is business. It could be marriage. It could be anything. There are 4 questions. And I've noticed that the failure to ask these 4 questions and to agree on the answers is responsible for an incredible number of business and relationship failures. And if you're successful, if you ask these, if you pay attention to them and they're aligned, your answers are aligned with your opposite number, whoever you're getting into that relationship with, your chances of success skyrockets. So
I'm sitting on the edge of my seat, Eliot.
I'll tell you what they are, because see, this is normally the part, this is like clickbait. You won't believe number 3. So if it's not clickbait, I should say, if you just pay me 3 payments of $19.99, I'll tell you what those 4 payments are.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we give them the first 3 and then just hang out the last one till the next episode?
I'll follow your lead on that. But I'll do this. I'm not only for your listeners, I'm not going to charge anything.
Yeah.
So here are the 4 questions. The first question, and I'll put it in the context of an employee who's joining a company.
Yeah.
Here's what you have to ask. The first question.
Are we talking here from the employee's point of view or the employer?
I'll do both.
Okay.
The question is the same, and that is, if I join your company, what would make this the best professional decision of my life? Now, that's a huge question, right? Because you're like, of my life, but you have to paint it in extreme terms. So from the employee's point of view, what would make this I'll use an American baseball reference. What would make this a home run?
Mm-hmm.
And you start thinking about it. You tell yourself a story. Well, what matters to me, the money's fine. That's great. That has to be acceptable. But if I could advance, if I had an opportunity to advance or get part ownership, if I could get really good at the skill that I care about at my craft, if I could broaden my personal brand, if I could meet other people, if I could travel, whatever that is, whatever's important to you, sit down and you tell yourself, what would really light up the entire board for me? So that's question number 1. And for the employer, same question.
Yep.
What would make hiring this guy the best decision we've made in the last 10 years?
Yeah.
And the reason that's important is because employers, they might have a job opening for a graphic designer. And they say, okay, well, we need a graphic designer. But they don't think, well, what would be great if this guy grew into this manager, or this guy, not only graphic designer, but expanded into web design or expanded into whatever other associated fields.
Yep.
But take time to think, what would make that a home run?
Yep.
The second question, and I ask this to clients when clients call me up and they say, hey, Eliot, can you take a look at this contract for me? So I can look at the contract, but let me ask you this question. If you sign this contract, what would make you call me in 6 months after you sign it, asking to pay me to get you the hell out of this contract?
Right.
What would be so bad? And then they start saying, well, if X happened, if Y happened, if Z happened, whatever that is. And a lot of times, the answer to that question isn't a reason for termination. It's not justification for termination in the contract. And so I'd say to my client, well, you're telling me you'd want me to get you out of the contract if they fell 30 days behind schedule. But the contract doesn't say you can cancel if they fall 30 days behind schedule. So let's write that in there.
Right.
So first, before you get caught up in the legalese, you've got to really tell yourself the story. What would make this work? And let me give you a concrete example. I'll go back to the employment relationship. When you hire somebody as an employer, it's fun because they want the job. It's a happy conversation. You get a need filled. You're successful at what you set out to do because you're hiring somebody. It's great. If you fire somebody, it's hard to do. I don't know how many of your listeners have actually fired somebody, but I know for me, if I know I have to come in on Friday and fire somebody, my stomach is in knots on Thursday. Because it's not going to be a fun conversation. And there's a chance that they're going to look at me and they're going to say, why are you firing me? I mean, I thought it was going okay. I thought I was doing okay. And they might, look, they have to go home and they have to tell their wife, their girlfriend, their boyfriend, their husband, whatever. They lost their job. They're wondering how they're going to pay their bills. So you got to have your ducks in a row. So you've got to have your ducks in a row. You've got to be able to say, I'm firing you because you lost the McCormick contract, you're behind schedule, you're over budget, and your customer satisfaction rating is below 92% or whatever the things are.
Yep.
So what if before you hired them, this goes back to the question, why would I want to get out of this? Before you stuck your hand across the table to shake hands with them, if you said, hey, here's why I'm going to fire you. I'm going to fire you if your CUSAT rating is below 92%. If you're over budget, if you're behind schedule, if you lose the McCormick account.
Yep.
Now, that's not the fun part of the conversation in hiring, but nobody leaves that discussion unclear of what it takes to survive and what the expectations are.
Yes.
So that's why those two questions. Why is it the best decision? Why am I going to have to terminate, fire? Why am I going to have to break this contract?
Mm-hmm.
You answer those two questions, you share your answers, you're in alignment to those, the chances of your having a successful contract skyrocket just with those two.
Wow.
So you wanted to go back to the process of firing?
Well, no. I suppose it's not so much the process of firing. I think kind of what you've said there is managing expectations to a degree. So I think this is certainly an experience that I've had in the past with jobs that I've been in. And it's also, I suppose issues that I've had with staff. To be honest, it's probably never the staff member's fault as such as it is the owner's fault in not clearly dictating and laying out a roadmap of expectations. And I guess this is what you're saying. You can address these things within the contract in the initial conversation, and therefore it sort of sets a bit of a benchmark for that relationship looking forward, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's the firing conversation shouldn't come as a surprise. There should be constant communication.
Right.
There should be expectations that both sides understand.
Yep.
As a matter of fact, it was last year, one of my lawyers, something happened and she just couldn't resolve it and it kept happening. And I walked into her office and I sat down with her and I said, look, I love you, but I have to fire you, right? And she looked at me and she looked up and she started to protest. She's a lawyer after all. She argues for a living. She started protesting. Then she went, yeah, I know. So, all right. So let's just talk about how this is done gracefully and how we can make sure that nobody's hurt, and we go forward. And it was fine. And she knew I had to fire her because the expectations were there and she knew it.
And are you still married?
That's a great question. Yeah, no, I wouldn't marry a lawyer. No.
Well, I mean, look, this is a great point, and I think if anyone can take anything out of this conversation so far, it's that manage the expectations from the onset. And in a scenario where you did have to let this lady go, and I'm guessing you're going to get to this, so I'm just going to try and put words in your mouth before you do. Did you do things like, did you have KPIs in place? Did you have regular reviews that, she was not conforming to, like all these kind of things? Is that what happened?
In a way, I certainly did have KPIs in place. I do not like regular reviews, and I hate annual reviews.
Okay.
Annual reviews are the worst device that companies employ, and I'll explain why. Let me just go back to one point about the conversation, just a quick tip.
Sure.
And that is, if I tell you, Matt, we sit down and I say, Matt, you're ignoring me. You've been ignoring me for a week. Well, that puts baggage on you. And you can say, I'm not ignoring you. Maybe you were distracted. Maybe you didn't notice I was there, or whatever it was. But I'm putting baggage on you. I'm saying that you're ignoring me. Same thing if I'm firing somebody and I'm saying that you don't care about the work or you don't have work ethic, or I'm putting that baggage. It's much easier in the conversation if I say, well, I feel ignored, or I've perceived that you haven't been diligent, or I've perceived that you lack work ethic for this. It's much harder to attack that because you may say that you have work ethic, but it doesn't change the truth of my statement that I've perceived this.
Right.
And so I would frame it that way. But do you want me to tell you why I hate reviews?
I'd love you to.
Okay. So
I agree, for the record, but carry on.
I have represented employers in trial before judges and juries more times than I can count, over 30 years. And at no time have I ever entered an exhibit of an employment review in favor of my client. Never.
Right.
Those exhibits, those employment reviews are always, always, always entered as exhibits for the employee, for the aggrieved person who's suing my company. And here's why. Because let's say that I fire this employee and I fire this person and I say that this person just was incompetent. They weren't a good fit. They didn't understand how to deal with my customers. They screwed the pooch on projects, whatever you want to say. Well, they sue me. And by the way, there is one reason in my experience, one reason and one reason only that employees sue employers. Yeah. And that is righteous indignation. How dare you do that to me? They've got to be pissed off.
Like ego?
Well, it could be ego. It could be, I feel like you belittled me. You didn't respect me. You fired me because of my color or ethnicity, whatever it happens to be. But so you can really diffuse a lot of these things if you actually treat people with respect, because it takes a lot to sue somebody. There are legal fees, it's time, it's emotional energy. So in order to decide that I'm going to sue you, I've got to be blazing mad. So if you can diffuse that as an employer, good on you, because that's what you have to. So anyway, back to the employee reviews. So you say that you fired this person because of all of these different reasons. And then she pulls out a sheaf of these reviews where for the last 5 years, she's been rated good to very good. So a typical review has a scale of 1 to 5. 1 is horrible, 5 is excellent. Here's what managers do. They won't rate you as a 1 because they know that if they rate you as a 1, you should have been fired. They're not firing. They don't want to rate you as a 5 because for many managers, only God gets a 5, right? So not going to do that. They don't want to rate you as a 2 because 2 is still a really bad conversation. And what managers like to do is avoid awkwardness. They're not trained for this bad conversation because for most companies, these reviews are just something to get over. Let's get it done with. So what do? They're down to 3 and 4. 3 is satisfactory, fulfills all expectations. 4 is good to very good.
Okay.
So even with an employee that they can't stand, they kick the can down the road, they rate them as 3s and 4s. So later, when they fire somebody for incompetence, the employee stands up and says, look, here's 5 years of I've been a great employee, a good employee, very good, satisfactory, certainly. And now you're saying I'm incompetent. And so the jury goes, yeah, the employer had to fire her because she's Jewish or she's short or she's Methodist or she's whatever it is. Because it's not competence because they said for the past 5 years that she was fine.
Right.
I hate reviews.
Okay.
But I like continuous communication. If you make things clear at the outset and then you talk to people.
And so are these conversations, these continual conversations, are they documented conversations?
They're documented conversations if there's a problem and there's a plan of action to correct it.
Because how then do you avoid that argument? Well, I've been here for 5 years and I've never had a review.
But that's not an argument. That's just a statement.
Okay.
It still doesn't prove that you were competent. It just proves that there's no paperwork. And so you're choosing between the lesser of two evils. But I will tell you, as an attorney, if I see my client, who's an employer, come in with a personnel file that is, 4 feet thick, I know damn well there's a lot of stuff in there I'm going to be uncomfortable defending.
Right, okay.
There's a lot for a plaintiff's attorney to attack.
Yep.
If it's got 4 sheets in there, the worst that happens for me is that I have to explain why more things weren't documented.
Right.
I'll take that bullet because I still get to have my client testify.
Yep, I'm with you. So basically what you're saying is less is more, but more conversation is more.
Yeah, more conversation. Look, especially with the people that are being hired now, the 20-year-olds, the 25-year-olds, whatever. These are people, and I don't mean this in a negative way, I'm just talking about psychologically. These are people that will put something on Instagram, go to the bathroom, come back, and want to see how many likes they have or how many follows or how many comments or whatever it is.
Right.
It's an instantaneous feedback society. That's how we're being built right now. And to say that if you have an issue in February, you and I are going to have a serious sit down in December, That makes no sense.
Right. Gotcha. Okay.
And it's also not how you keep people. I mean, you want to give great feedback too. Hey, I love what you did here. You have to weave those stories and also the near misses into the DNA of your organization.
So how do you suggest conducting these conversations with staff members or whatever it may be without being that overbearing, micromanaging jerk that we all dread?
Well, first I have to point out that you are, and maybe you don't appreciate this, but you have just asked a lawyer how not to be a jerk. And I think that's really tricky ground for both of us, I think. So I'm gonna skate right by that, though I had to point it out. One of the things that I really recommend, and you have to convince people of this. We have in my office what is known as a bloodless autopsy.
A what?
A bloodless autopsy.
Okay.
And that is, look, every business has near misses. Something that happened, whether it was I didn't realize I was supposed to be here, I almost missed this meeting with the client, or somebody came close to missing a deadline, or we didn't calendar this correctly, or we can't find this document, whatever it happens.
Right.
Now, if the company culture, if I called the person who I think was responsible into my office and I gave them a real dressing down, warned them that this could never happen again, they're on very thin ice, they might be fired. That's one way to handle it, but I've created a very defensive culture, and more importantly, I haven't learned it. So instead, I'll call people into a conference room, people who have responsibility in this particular area. And the focus of the conversation is not who screwed up. The focus is, okay, this is what happened. Let's talk about how we get better so we can avoid this landmine in the future. So we do the autopsy, but we don't draw any blood. I'm not going after who screwed up, because if I create this environment and now people know that I'm just looking for this teachable moment,
mm-hmm.
Then the person who's responsible can generally say, okay, this is what I saw happening. This is what I did. And I realized that I should have gone right when I went left. But in thinking about it, they could say that I should have gone right when I went left. And so my question is, okay, is there something we need to do in our process to better instruct you, to make it a no-brainer to go right instead of left?
Mm-hmm.
Or is that just something you have to learn from and now you always know and we don't have to change anything? Or is it just like the Irish sweepstakes? It'll never happen again. And so a lot of times they'll say, it would help if 2 steps before me, this note was put on the file.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, now I've accomplished one purpose, which is that the person who made the mistake understands it. I've accomplished a second purpose, which is that we've made it less likely to happen again. And I've accomplished a third purpose, which is we've become a learning organization by teaching everybody else who might be in that position, hey, this is a landmine that either exploded too close or we avoided, and we can all benefit from that, sidestepping it in the future.
Now, Eliot, I know that you're an avid listener to this podcast, and so with that in mind, you would surely be aware of the fact that we constantly talk about the importance of system implementation into a business. And it sounds like what you've just said then is really systems.
It is. There is definitely a system. You said at the outset of this podcast that maybe one of the things we have to talk about is what happens when things don't go right. And a mistake that a lot of people make is they view those as isolated incidents, when instead, just like you've always said, there should be a system of addressing that.
Yeah. Because what I've found very often certainly within my experience on both sides of the fence here, when there is a problem with a way that a certain task or something's being carried out, it's very often comes back to a training issue, or you just don't know what you don't know. And to be honest, in most scenarios, I normally, as the business owner, will take responsibility for that. If something isn't done the way I want it, I don't look at it as a fault from my staff members. I look at it as a fault in the system that I've created for them to follow.
No, you're absolutely right. And first, you do take responsibility as the business owner. That's one of the things that is on your plate. That's what you've undertaken to own or start a company.
Mm-hmm.
But it also has to be impressed upon everybody that your ultimate goal is not to go after people. Your ultimate goal is to grow your business, to fulfill your customers' expectations, to exceed your customers' expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And to do that, you need engagement and honesty and a commitment to improve.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get that if you just belittle people or go on a witch hunt.
Gotcha. Okay. And do you think, in your experience, having the right processes in place, I mean, well, let me tell you my experience anyway. My experience is when you do have the right processes in place, it actually empowers staff, and it makes them feel a lot more secure, knowing that they have a bit of a blueprint, and they know what you're expecting, and they can do things the way you want them done, as opposed to the way that they may have been doing them previously in order to comply with your boundaries, or the product that you want to be delivered in the end. So
right, no, that's always true. The thing is, there is never a vacuum.
Right.
In other words, so if you don't lay out a process, and you have 10 employees, all 10 of them are going to fill in that vacuum, that empty space, with what they think the process is.
Gotcha.
Okay. And so you'll have 10 different processes, sometimes at odds with each other. But, your choice is, do you want to have chaos, or do you want to have the process the way you want it done?
Yeah.
And you give latitude. It's not like, you're treating them as mindless automatons, but you have to give guidance, and people like guidance.
Yeah. One of the powerful things we've seen work as well in that regard is giving them the flexibility to, make changes to those systems themselves, or improve the systems, I should say. Obviously, it needs to be approved by whoever's in charge, but we like to empower people within the organization to, if they can figure out a better way to do something, then by all means put it forward. And if it's better, then I think it's ignorant for people to presume or assume that they are the be all end all and they know everything. I think it's really encouraging when staff members come to me and they'll say, "Hey, listen, there's a better way of doing this. What do you reckon?" I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because in fact, that's one of my litmus tests. When I have an employee, particularly a new employee, that comes in and says, "Hey, I was thinking, we do this, but maybe if we did that, it would be better."
Yeah.
Mentally, I'm like, "Oh, she's a keeper."
Music to my ears. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because your organization gets to the point where, and you don't have to be a multi-billion-dollar enterprise to get to this point, but you get to the point where you, as the founder, you don't know, you're not hands-on with every single thing. Right. And so whether it's just a different way to do postage, or it's an entire client fulfillment mechanism. Yeah. Yeah, God, I love it when I hear from people directly responsible for that.
Right. I mean, this is a conversation I literally had with a fellow yesterday. We've got a platform which we've built, which helps people put systems into their business. It's like a framework, if you will. And he was having the same conversation with him, in the sense that, well, he knows that they're growing currently, and they've got a lot of work, and they're busier, and they're putting staff on all these kind of things. But where they're falling behind is in that, I suppose, that management process. Like, you really need some sort of systems in place or framework for him to put systems, so that when these new people are coming in, they're following the guidelines that he has set in order to carry out these tasks, and to basically get started the right way, and just wants to grow the business with consistency.
Yeah, and to do that, there's often a missing ingredient, which is insight. Right. Because a lot of people don't take the time or have the humility or the capacity to really look inside themselves and to look in the mirror and say, "Yeah, you're not good at that at all." I mean, so to give you an example, I'm really good at the ideas and direction and setting up the processes and things like that. But I'm really horrible at the cleanup. Right. If the deal is done, for example, making sure all the documents get where they need to be and putting the closing binder together and just doing the stuff that really needs to be done at the end, I am so bored. I'm so done. Yeah. Other people might look at this and say, they're great at forming the company, they're great at motivating the troops, but they hate confrontation, and they can't go into an employee and say, "Hey, look, I'm sorry, but you used all your overtime or used all your pay time off, and you can't have that long weekend at the beach with pay. You're going to have to take it unpaid." They don't want to have that conversation. Yeah. So if you have your insight and I'm not good at this stuff, then you can't cut it out of the system. You just got to find somebody who is. Yeah.
So let's make a bit of a segue towards, I suppose, maybe some legal documents that business owners, a lot of the people that listen to this podcast are business owners. What are some of the standout? Of course, this will vary industry to industry, but most of our listeners are contractors, tradespeople. What are some of the standard documentation that they would require for their business as a starting point? Obviously, contracts.
Yes, most everything comes down to contracts. If it's not filing with the state, it comes down to contracts. And so there are a couple key contracts that you have. One is an agreement with your co-owners. You can call it a buy-sell, you can call it a shareholders agreement, you can call it a partnership agreement, whatever it is. But so you need that. And the mistake that I see a lot of businesses make is that, you have 2 partners, 3 partners come in, they love each other, they've been best friends since, they were 15, whatever. And they say, look, we are in agreement, we are on the same page for everything, we don't need some legal document, let's just go forward with other things. But partnerships will break up.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you turn on each other, but nobody moves in lockstep through life. So death, disability, somebody could put in 20 years and say, hey, it's been great, fellas, but I really want to move to the beach and sell flip-flops and umbrellas. It could be that, there's a family situation. All of a sudden they have to move from Australia over to New Zealand and they can't run the business there, or whatever it is, life happens.
Yeah.
And so the failure to have a partnership agreement that deals with what happens when somebody leaves under whatever circumstances is a major issue. The second is a standard agreement with your customer or your client. And I'm not talking about a 50-page single-space 9-point font agreement written in Latin. Just something that sets forth the basic terms of who's going to do what, what you're going to do, how much you're going to be paid, who's responsible for paying you, when they're going to be responsible for paying you, and what happens if one of you doesn't perform.
Yeah.
And so when talking about contracts, I said at the beginning, and it was kind of clickbaity, there were 4 questions, right? Remember that?
Yep.
And we talked about 2 of them.
Yep.
Okay, I'll tell you the other 2.
Okay.
Unless you want me to just tell you one and then say on the next episode.
Let's not do that.
If you pay Matt I don't even know what the Australian currency is, $10 or shekels or whatever.
10 Australian rupiah. Yeah.
Okay, whatever it is. He'll give you the 4th question. So anyway, so the 3rd and 4th questions are really mirror images of each other. And they are, and you can picture employer, employee, or customer and vendor, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
What can I do over your objection? So think about this in the context of a partnership. You and I are partners in a business, and maybe we're 50-50. And so the question is, what can I do over your objection? Mm-hmm. Now, one answer is, I might be able to buy pencils. I might be able to buy files. I might be able to go to the office supply store. I might be able to take a day off. But I doubt in our business that I could fire you, for example, or I could buy another company and commit us to $1 million contract without your approval, or that I could hire a $400,000 a year employee without your approval. So there's an old saying that, your right to swing your fist ends where my nose begins.
Okay.
So that's what you think. What can I do over your objection? And maybe the answer is nothing. Maybe we have to be in lockstep. We have to agree on everything. But fleshing that out is key to any agreement.
So could that be rephrased in saying, what am I responsible for in the decision-making process within this agreement? Well,
that's certainly part of the agreement. What are you responsible for? But it really speaks to, what are the limits of your authority?
Gotcha. Okay.
So where does that stop? And so the other question is a mirror image. What can you do over my objection?
Okay.
Because each party has to ask that. And if you flesh that out, then neither one of you ever has to call the lawyer and go, hey, can he do that? Because I think he broke our agreement. I didn't think he was allowed to do that. So, well, if the agreement addresses these questions, it can tell you exactly what he can do if you say no.
Okay, I've got you. So what can I do over your objection, and then what can
you do over my objection? It's just the mirror image of each other.
Gotcha. Yeah, interesting. Now, I'm wondering, in that scenario, is this are we outlining here like specific job roles?
It doesn't have to be specific job roles. It doesn't have to be that you're the guy that hires our staff, and I'm the guy that signs the contracts with the customers, and you're the guy that makes sure that the trash is emptied in the office and that we have the carpets cleaned or whatever. You can do that. And depending upon the size of your business and the nature of your business, that might be a good idea. But it does the opposite. It fills in the blank spaces. It says, regardless of your job roles, what can't you do? Because the essence of a lot of business disputes are unpleasant surprises.
Right.
I came in and you took an advance on your salary. I came in and you changed banks, fired our accountant and got a new one. Whatever it is, if there's something that's going to be an unpleasant surprise, you could probably deal with it. But if that unpleasant surprise would be unacceptable to you or violates the rule that, you swung your fist and you hit my nose, so your right to swing your fist ends where my nose begins. If you did something that violates that rule and now I have a bloody nose, well, the agreement should prevent that. It should say, this is the limit of your right to swing.
That must be a hard thing to enforce initially when, as small business owners, we come across things every day that may be new and may be different. I'm guessing in big business as well, but how do you address that from the onset when you have no idea what may potentially arise?
Well, because you don't get too granular.
Gotcha.
I think that you just take the big things, and a lot of times it comes down to money.
Right.
You can't do any. How are you going to hurt me in our partnership, Matt? How are you going to hurt me? You're going to hurt me by diluting the value of my ownership. You're going to hurt me by reducing my current income, and you're going to hurt me by reducing my possible future income. So, and you might do that not maliciously. You and I might have reasonable people can disagree. You and I might have an agreement because you might say, we're making a great living right now, but I would rather spend the next 5 years reinvesting in our business and expand to, overseas. And I may say to you, Matt, we're making a great living here. I'm fine without expanding overseas. I just want to keep making my great living. I don't want to take a pay cut for 5 years and one of the reasons might be, hey, you just got married, but I've got a kid that's entering college and I'm looking tuition square in the face.
Right.
So you take these general things that neither one of us without the approval of the other can give ourselves a raise. Neither one of us without the approval of the other can sign a contract over a certain amount. Neither one of us without the approval of the other can do something, hire somebody, buy something, whatever, that's going to put a dent in our cash flow and whatever that number is. So that's how you do it. It's broad brushstrokes.
Okay, I gotcha. Because as well, I suppose as business owners, you are often put in situations where you might have to make decisions that go against what you initially thought was right,
Sure.
So in that situation, if you've got like a contract or whatever that clearly states against what you're doing, against the actions that you're taking, how do you address that? Is that just, again, through conversation and getting everyone on board?
Yeah, the best way to do that, you're going to have to address it sooner or later.
Right.
Unless you believe the other side will look the other way, which maybe they do.
Yeah.
But it's a psychological issue. It's not so much legal, it's psychological at first, which means that you got to know the person on the other side. My best recommendation is talk to them. Mm-hmm. Treat them how you'd want to be treated. I'd rather you come to me and say, Eliot, look, I know our agreement said that both of us would be making this as a salary, but I got to tell you, and maybe this is an excuse, but you're a single guy, you're living alone. I've got 2 kids in college. I can't make it on this. What can we do? Yeah. I'd rather you do that than just find out that you're writing checks and not telling me.
Right. Yeah, okay. I'm with you. That makes sense. What about let's talk about getting paid, because that's a big thing, especially for a lot of tradespeople around the world. How do you address that problem of, okay, I've done the work, I've sent the invoice and I haven't been paid?
Well, there are a couple of things. First, I spoke about getting something signed.
Yep.
And so, you have your basic terms that we went over, including who's responsible for paying you.
Mm-hmm. That
it's not a shell corporation, not something I just formed, but something that I could actually collect the money from.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's I was always told that a judgment is nothing but a hunting license. If there's no game in the woods, there's no game in the woods. If there's no money in the company, then it doesn't matter that you got your $1 billion judgment. So get it in writing, no matter how good friends you are, or no matter how long-standing the client relationship is, get it in writing.
Yeah.
I would also tell you there is no substitute, no magic legal language, no contract you can sign that serves as a substitute to the necessity of dealing with somebody that has integrity.
Yeah, right.
So that's a no-brainer. A third thing is that you have to make sure that whatever they're asking for you is a fit with what your strength is.
Yeah.
A lot of new companies make the mistake of, this isn't our strength, but we'll take this on. We don't like this kind of work, but we'll do it because the guy's got his checkbook open and we need to make payroll.
Yeah.
And I get it. I do. I've been there.
Yeah.
I get that. And you got to do what you got to do. But you have to know your risk skyrockets when that happens, because bad clients push out good clients and bad clients get aggrieved. So what happens is you hate this client. You don't like the work. You don't like who they are. You didn't want to do this in the first place. You're just taking it because they could pay you. And they're the kind of people, that you get a call from them and your first reaction is, oh, right? You see that email. Oh, geez. You put it at the bottom of the pile, even subconsciously.
Yeah.
You do anything else before getting back to them. So now you have a bad client that's ticked off because you haven't done this or you haven't done that or whatever it is. So you got to take the client that's fit and you got to know who you are.
Yeah. But
once you get it in writing, the other thing that I would tell you is you cannot be a nice guy.
Yeah.
You can't be strung along. Oh, so-and-so's on vacation. She'll look at it when she gets back. Oh, well, we have cash flow issues over here, but we're going to do this in next month and the next month, and calendar pages keep turning. And then all of a sudden, you're so far out and you've devoted so much that you're never going to get back.
Yeah.
The next thing is you stop work. You just stop.
Yeah.
You don't keep going. Most people know the flags go up. They know when their problems are. You don't keep performing while there's a question of payment. You just address it.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of our listeners out there that would be in the scenarios where, especially for the guys that do project-based work, they might be doing home renovations and things like that, or maybe they're contractors that work for builders, so they might be plumbers or electricians and things like that. And then there's, they have this whole retention scenario where, the builder or the whoever it may be, the
general contractor,
the principal contractor may be withholding money based off a certain period of time,
mm-hmm.
and that's in pretty much every scenario every company that I speak with. Getting that money is never as easy as it should be.
No, it's not. And it depends. See, I could go into that's a conversation for another hour. Just the construction industry, AIA contracts, retention bonds. There are a lot of things that you can do to, how you sign change orders, what the applications for payment look like, whether they're date specific or invoice specific. There are a lot of things that you have to do to make sure that you have your best shot at getting your retention.
Right.
But the critical step is that you've got to stay on top of it. You've got to become the squeaky wheel. You've got to make sure if there's a problem, they tell you immediately and you don't find out in 3 months. If there's a likelihood that they're going to hold back money, you better know now. You should build something into the contract that says, hey, if I submit an invoice to you, you've got 10 days, 15 days, 30 days, whatever it is, to tell me that there's a problem. Otherwise, you waive the right to do so. It's going to be deemed undisputed.
Gotcha.
So you create this sunset deadline where they better tell you so that they can't wake up 3 months or 14 months from the date that you submitted the invoice and say, oh, yeah, there's a problem. That was short 2 truckloads or whatever it was. So you ask yourself, just go back to that question. Why would we want to get out? Why would we call our lawyer? Okay, well, we would call our lawyer if we didn't get paid. Why wouldn't we? And then why wouldn't we get paid? Well, we wouldn't get paid if they felt we were late, if they felt we shorted them deliveries, if they felt that we did this work incorrectly. All right, so what would we want? We would want to know immediately if that was a claim they're making. So you build it into the contract that you've got a certain amount of time to tell us, or you lose the right to do so.
Yeah.
Because you want to say, hey, if you had told me back 4 months ago, I could have fixed this. But now it's an issue.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. And to be honest with you, that's probably, I think that would be so relevant to so many people right across the board, not necessarily just builders, but in tradies. Like that's something that I think I'm certainly going to take away and implement myself.
Yeah, and you have the conversation with the other side. You have to know how to negotiate with them, but you have to stand up for the things that are going to prevent your nightmare scenario.
Yes. Okay. Well, look, I suppose getting conscious of your time, maybe we'll just move on quickly to maybe some of the ways that we can address problems and when's the right time to involve the lawyer and how to address your client correctly, in a legal, I suppose, scenario. Maybe we could just jump into that quickly. What do you reckon?
Well, I think that, look, first of all, I'm going to tell you something that it's going to sound salesy, but it's not. I think that there's no substitute to having a good relationship with an attorney, just somebody that you can bounce ideas off of.
Yeah.
That said, there are a lot of steps that you can take before writing checks to your lawyer, because lawyers are expensive.
Yeah.
And if you had a situation or a system where every time something happens, you would start paying a lawyer, your profit would disappear.
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't quite disappear. It would go into the lawyer, but it would disappear from your bottom line. So, but we know where it goes. So I think that what you really have to do is you have to make sure that you have your conversation with the other side and say, and this is where lawyers are really handy because people don't like them. So this is what you say. You say, look, you and I really disagree about this issue. We just can't see eye to eye. I get that. But I'll bet there's one thing we agree on, and that is that neither one of us wants to write a check to a lawyer. And more than that, I bet we also agree that lawyers make too damn much money. So let's avoid that problem. Let's avoid contributing to that issue. Because if we don't solve it here in this meeting, then we're going to be part of the lawyers make too damn much money problem. And I don't think either one of us wants to do that. And so a lot of times you'd be surprised. People are like, yeah, geez, I don't want to pay a lawyer either. Okay. All right. So then you figure you attack it on a human ground. Neither one of us is going to walk away from this conversation happy.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a 100% solution. It's not going to be a 100% solution if we went to court. But let's talk about both sides of it. And if you air it out, this is the last thing that I would say. I said, look, if I don't want to go to my lawyer, I don't want to go to my lawyer unless I can answer the following question, absolutely yes. The question is, have I done everything that I could possibly do to avoid having to spend legal fees? Have I? And so I would ask, as a business owner, look at the guy across the table from you with whom you have this disagreement and say, look, that's fine. This is why God made courthouses. If we can't agree, let's go to our corners. We'll hire our lawyers. We'll write big checks. We'll go to court. But let's promise each other that we won't do that until each of us can honestly answer, yes, we've done everything possible we can do to avoid having to pay legal fees.
Yeah. And
a lot of times it puts people in the mindset to agree. Because like if the problem is that you and I have, $100 dispute. I know it would be a lot more than that, but let's say that you and I have a $100 dispute. It would make no sense for each of us to pay the lawyer $150 just for a shot at getting $100 back. So have that conversation first. Take the ego out of the room. Take the, you screwed up, you did this, no good SOB, you did all that. Take that out of the room and just focus on the fact that no one wants to pay a lawyer and then move forward.
Yeah. No, I think that's pretty sound advice.
Yeah, it's not advice that's going to help me put my kid through college, but other than that, it's pretty sound advice.
Oh, that's great. Well, look, I think unless you had anything else you wanted to add to that conversation, I mean, obviously we could talk on specifics, ongoing in for days and days. However, I think for the purpose of this podcast and this episode, I think we've given it a pretty good general overview. What do you reckon?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are so many things to get into. How do you negotiate what it seems like you two are in an impasse? What's the best way to interpret contracts and deal with contract review? But we don't have that kind of time. But I'd love to come back and we can chat about other things.
Okay, well, maybe we can do that. Maybe we can do a follow-up episode or a follow-up series even, and we can talk a little bit more about some of the specifics. For the listeners out there, if there is anything specific that you would like to hear about from a legal perspective, leave us some comments in the show notes here in the comments section. Head across to thesiteshed.com. You'll find this podcast. It'll have its own webpage. You can leave some comments there. Let us know what's been plaguing you or what you'd like to hear more specifically about. And Eliot and I will do a follow-up podcast for you, and we'll get to the bottom of it. How's that for an offer?
Absolutely. Sounds good.
All right, well, that's great. I mean, I think we covered off on some really good things there. I'm pretty happy with that. So I'd like to thank you for your time today, Eliot, and I appreciate all of your knowledge that you've instilled on our listeners.
My pleasure.
And as I said before, you guys, if you have any questions, by all means, head across to the show notes, leave us some comments. If you want to get hold of Eliot directly, you can do so. Eliot is at Wagenheim at Twitter, which is at WAGONHEIM. The website is wagenheim.com. And Eliot also has a podcast. Tell us a little about your podcast before we close out.
I do. It's called So Here's My Story, and it's about business stories. So a lot of times we find entrepreneurs, business people thinking, oh, I thought I was the only one that did this or thought this, or here's how I could handle this differently, or boy, did I really screw up on that one, or this was my best day. I wish I could do this again, but this is how I want to go through my best day. This is how I want to sculpt my career.
Yep.
And I love the stories. And so I have a co-host, Jody Hume, who's excellent. She's an executive coach and facilitator. Much higher emotional IQ than I have. And I'm the lawyer. I'm not supposed to have an emotional IQ. And so we talk about business stories and the takeaways from the absurd to the profound to the things you use every day. And it's called So Here's My Story.
Brilliant. And that's, I'm guessing, on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud.
On iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, all that stuff. Yeah.
Right on. Okay. Well, I'll leave some links to that within the show notes also.
Great.
Other than that, I think that's a wrap pretty much. So thank you for tuning in, listeners, wherever you are around the world. I appreciate you sharing your earbuds with us, and we're going to close that out for today. Thank you for listening to another episode of Toolbox Talks. If you're liking what you hear, then you can head across to thesiteshed.com, where you can join our community by signing up to our Toolbox Talks. You'll get sent a weekly notification, which is basically a highlight of everything that we've spoken about during that week, along with any other industry news that may be relevant or specific to the trades. If you're enjoying the show, you can head across to iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, where you can leave us a review. That would be fantastic, and all the reviews get read out in the show. Likewise, if you have any friends or colleagues that you think would benefit from the show and the episodes that we create, then please go ahead and share it with them.